Hello, everyone. Welcome to 21. We are in Living Theosophy, section 21, but actually finishing up 5 in the Key to Theosophy. Very excited, loving this. I'm upping my technological game too, so we're going to try something new with this week's video and see how it works. So, I don't know. We're learning as we go. We've been learning as we go, and it's all an evolution together. So, welcome. These are book studies. I read the book. I share my understandings with you. But remember, this is for you. This is a journey for you. Nature is where the answers are. They're closer than our own breath, and the temple is within you. So it is not about me or my interpretation. I will include a link to the original text in the description down below. There's more studies. You can begin at any time, anywhere. There are free ebooks over at livingtheosophy.com. I do this as a labor of love because these teachings have changed my life. I have found something to do with all of these empathetic feelings that I've had all of my life since I was a kid that originally went into codependence and self-destruction. But I have now found something and I want to share it with you. That is the only reason I'm doing these. I'm doing these because I recognize their importance and I want to get them out into the world. And I've said this before, but I'm a former radio and television broadcaster, so I want to do something purposeful with my voice. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, we're in section 5 in the Buddhist teachings on the above. Now remember, you can start anywhere. You can go back and study the ones we've done before. So written in question and answer form, what does Buddhism teach with regard to the soul is asked. Theosophist answers, it depends whether you mean exoteric, popular Buddhism, or its esoteric teachings. The former explains itself in the Buddhist catechism in this wise. Soul, it considers, a word used by the ignorant to express a false idea. If everything is subject to change, then man is included, and every material part of him must change. That which is subject to change is not permanent, so there can be no immortal survival of a changeful thing. This seems plain and definite, but when we come to the question that the new personality in each succeeding rebirth is the aggregate of skandhas. Skandhas are aggregates or bundles of attributes, the karmic ingredients which constitute our personal self in each lifetime that we have. Now that definition was from Blavatsky, theosophy.com, so thank you for that. And Kutumi, Master KH, also writes that the skandhas represent not only a material, but also a set of mental and moral qualities. They are ever and ceaselessly at work in preparing the abstract mold, the privation, which is the hardship or lessons of the future being, of the future new being. Okay, so of the old personality, and ask whether this new aggregation of skandhas is a new being, likewise, in which nothing has remained of the last. We read that, in one sense, it is a new being. In another, it is not. During this life, the skandhas are continually changing. While the man AB of 40 is identical as regards personality with the youth AB of 18, yet by the continual waste and reparation of his body and change of mind and character, he is a different being. Nevertheless, the man in his old age justly reaps the reward or suffering consequent upon his thoughts and actions at every previous stage of his life. So the new being of the rebirth being the same individuality as before, but not the same personality, but with a changed form or new aggregation of skandhas, justly reaps the consequences of his actions and thoughts in the previous existence. This is abstruse, which means obscure or arcane metaphysics, and plainly does not express disbelief in soul by any means. Inquirer asks, is not something like this spoken of in esoteric Buddhism? Theosophist answers, it is. For this teaching belongs to both esoteric Buddhism or secret wisdom and to the exoteric, known or understood by the general public Buddhism, or the religious philosophy of Gautama Buddha. Inquirer, but we are distinctly told that most of the Buddhists do not believe in the soul's immortality. Theosophist, no more do we, if you mean by soul the personal ego or life soul, nefesh, the vital principle present in every living creature. But every learned Buddhist believes in the individual or divine ego. Those who do not err in their judgment. They're as mistaken on this point as those Christians who mistake the theological interpolations, which means to insert something different into something different of a different nature, of the latter editors of the Gospels about the damnation and hellfire for verbatim utterances of Jesus. Neither Buddha nor Christ ever wrote anything themselves, but they spoke in allegories and used dark sayings as true initiates did, and will do for a long time to come. Both scriptures treat of all such metaphysical questions very cautiously, and both Buddhist and Christian records sin by that excess of esotericism, the dead letter, which is, a dead letter means a law or a treaty which has not been repealed but is ineffectual and defunct in practice, meaning far overshooting the mark in both cases. Inquirer: do you mean to suggest that neither the teachings of Buddha nor those of Christ have ever been heretofore rightly understood? Theosophist: what I mean is just as you say. Both Gospels, the Buddhist and the Christian, were preached with the same object in view. Both reformers were ardent philanthropists and practical altruists, preaching most unmistakably socialism of the noblest and highest type, self-sacrifice to the bitter end. Let the sins of the whole world fall upon me, that I may relieve man's misery and suffering, cries Buddha. I will not let one cry whom I could save, exclaims the prince beggar, clad in the refuse rags of the burial grounds. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, is the appeal to the poor and the disinherited made by the man of sorrows, who hath not where to lay his head. The teachings of both are boundless love for humanity, charity, forgiveness of injury, forgetfulness of self, and pity for the deluded masses. Both show the same contempt for riches and make no difference between meum and tuum, which is Latin for me and you. So that's the etymology there, meum and tuum. Their desire was, without revealing all the sacred mysteries of initiation, is to give the ignorant and the misled, whose burden in life was too heavy for them, hope enough and an inkling into the truth, sufficient to support them in their heaviest hours. But the object of both reformers was frustrated, owing to excessive zeal of their later followers. The words of the masters having been misunderstood and misinterpreted, behold the consequences. Inquirer: but surely Buddha must have repudiated, which means refused to accept the soul's immortality, if all the Orientalists and his own priests say so. Theosophist answers: the arhats, which are the worthy ones or the adepts, began by following the policy of their master, and the majority of the subsequent priests were not initiated, just as in Christianity. And so, little by little, the great esoteric truths became almost lost. A proof in point is that out of the two existing sects in Ceylon, which is formerly Sri Lanka, the Siamese believes death to be the absolute annihilation of individuality and personality, and the other explains nirvana as we Theosophists do. Inquirer: but why in that case do Buddhism and Christianity represent the two opposite poles of such belief? Theosophist: because the conditions under which they were preached were not the same. In India, the Brahmins, jealous of their superior knowledge and excluding from it every caste save their own, had driven millions of men into idolatry and almost fetishism. Buddha had to give the death blow to an exuberance of unhealthy fancy and fanatical superstition from ignorance, such as rarely been seen before or after. Better a philosophical atheism than such ignorant worship for those who cry upon their gods and are not heard, or who are not heeded, and who live and die in mental despair. He had to arrest, first of all, this muddy torrent of superstition, to uproot the errors before he gave out the truth. And as he could not give out all for the same good reason as Jesus, who reminds his disciples that the mysteries of heaven are not for the unintelligent masses, but for the elect alone, and therefore he spake in parables. Matthew 13:11. And in Matthew 13:11 it says, and he answered them, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom, but to them it has not been given. So his caution led Buddha to conceal too much. He even refused to say to the monk Vaghigata whether there was or was not an ego in man. When pressed to answer, the Exalted One maintained silence. Now, there's a footnote here that Buddha gives to Ananda, his initiated disciple, who inquires for the reason of this silence. A plain and unequivocal answer in the dialogue translated by Oldenburg from the Samyuttaka Nikaya. If I, Ananda, when the wandering monk, Bhagavata, asked me, is there an ego, had answered, the ego is, then that, Ananda, would have confirmed the doctrine of the Samanas and the Brahmanas, who believed in permanence. If I, Ananda, when the wandering monk, Bhagavata, had asked me, is there not the ego, had answered, the ego is not, then that, Ananda, would have confirmed the doctrine of those who believed in annihilation. If I, Ananda, when the wandering monk, Bhagavata, asked me, is there the ego, had answered, the ego is, would that have served my end, Ananda, by producing in him the knowledge that all existences, the Dhamma, the karmic law, are non-ego? But if I, Ananda, had answered the ego is not, then that, Ananda, would have only caused the wandering monk Bhagavata to be thrown from one bewilderment to another. My ego, did it not exist before, but now it exists no longer? This shows better than anything that Gautama Buddha withheld such difficult metaphysical doctrines from the masses in order not to perplex them more. What he meant was the difference between the personal temporary ego and the higher self, which sheds light on the imperishable ego, the spiritual I of man, not eyeball, I. Inquirer, this refers to Gautama, but in what way does it touch the Gospels? Theosophist, read history and think over it. At the time the events narrated in the Gospels are alleged to have happened, there was a similar intellectual fermentation taking place in the whole civilized world, only with opposite results in the East and the West. The old gods were dying out, while the civilized classes drifted in the train of the unbelieving Sadducees, which are Jewish aristocratic priests, into materialistic negations and mere dead-letter law. And remember, dead letter means a law or treaty which has not been repealed, but is ineffectual. A Mosaic form in Palestine, and into moral dissolution in Rome. And the lowest and poorer classes ran after sorcery and strange gods, or became hypocrites and Pharisees. Once more, the time for spiritual reform had arrived. The cruel, anthropomorphic, and jealous God of the Jews, with his sanguinary, which is an ancient word meaning bloodshed, causing bloodshed, with these sanguinary laws of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, of the shedding of blood and animal sacrifice, had to be relegated to a secondary place and replaced by the merciful Father in secret. We've talked about that before. The latter had to be shown not as an extra cosmic God, but as a divine savior of the man of flesh, enshrined in his own heart and soul, in the poor as in the rich. No more here than in India could the secrets of initiation be divulged, lest by giving that which is holy to the dogs and casting pearls before swine, both the revealer and the things revealed should be trodden underfoot. Thus the reticence, which means restraint, of both Buddha and Jesus, whether the latter lived out the historic period allotted to him or not, and who equally abstained from revealing plainly the mysteries of life and death, led in one case to the blank negations, which means contradiction of Southern Buddhism, and in the other to the three clashing forms of the Christian Church and the 300 sects in Protestant England alone. So there we have that. It's a teleprompter, much different than reading the paper. So anyway, I'm grateful that you are here. Remember that my reading is simply to get it out there and share with you. I highly recommend, if you enjoy these videos, go back. There are other ones that we study. We do live studies of Light on the Path. We do that here on the Living Theosophy YouTube channel. These are all pointing towards this ancient wisdom, which are the mysteries written down by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the secret doctrine. Within this text are the root of all of the world's philosophies, sciences, spirituality, there's complex mathematics, there is astrology, astronomy, there's cosmogenesis, anthropogenesis, there is theology. It's all in here, okay? So how do you start? How do you begin? Some people say if they've read The Secret Doctrine, I don't know if you can actually read it and comprehend it with your intellectual mind. It is something that I believe has to be felt from the heart. And that is through application in tiny bits, applying this and becoming this teaching, which is pure compassion and balance and purpose and understanding of unity and oneness. We hear all these things regurgitated in the New Age movement. But what the heck does it mean and where did it come from? They cherry-picked it from these teachings. These were part of what happened in the New Thought movement, which is at the beginning of the 1900s, which is after these came out at the end of the 19th century. Yes, 19th century. However, they are ancient and they have been rising up in the teachings all over the world ever since time began. However, this collection is accessible online, easily accessible. But how do you begin to study theosophy? How does one begin? I would suggest with something a little lighter, much like a pamphlet. This is Light on the Path. And that's how I started. I came in and I thought, what is this? There's something here. I got to know more. So that led to The Voice of the Silence. The Voice of the Silence, also written down by HPB. But that led to The Key to Theosophy. And that led to a much happier, more purposeful life, a balanced life that all these things that I've always been fascinated with, which is compassion and empathy for other beings, but also the astral world. What do dreams mean? Afterlife, ghosts, psychic powers, that kind of stuff. All of that, it all ties together and it's all explained. It's all explained in the teachings of Theosophy. So I invite you to join me for more. If you wish, you can pick up where these book studies started, carry on in your own world, and become your own living theosophy, wherever you are. Because like candles in the darkest night, each one of us will then, by igniting, becoming these teachings. It's not up to us to change anyone else, but we can change ourselves. And by illuminating, others can come and light their lights, and then they go off and they light the darkness as well. I think it's time. So that's what I'm doing here. And welcome. And if you could, please, I need to ask this. I wasn't asking this for the longest time. Please click like, click the little bell so you can be notified when new book studies come available here on this channel, because I'd like to see this channel grow. The more people that know about theosophy, theosophy for all, not only the select. I believe it's time that everybody has access to these teachings. That's just my belief. I love you, and I'll see you soon.